My big suggestion to students, particularly through high school, is
you can do anything.
Choose it for you, not for it is worth
it. Just focus on the next
Doesn't
step.
matter what you're doing.
Don't be afraid.
As long as you're doing something.
That is such good advice.
I don't think I could see myself doing anything
It's a challenging life.
Student nights, Wednesday to Saturday.
I worked on that house.
I racked up every single dollar of debt that I
I
possibly
think
could.
there's a lot of pressure on high school.
Yeah, I
kids
just
these days,
love working outside.
And if money is something that you care a lot
In
about,
hindsight,
I've also been a very indecisive
But you
person.
keep looking for roads that have been less
It
travelled.
was just that moment that I knew what I wanted to do. So nothing else is going to change that.
Welcome to the guest speaker.
Can I welcome Caitlin Easter to the guest speaker today? Caitlin is another one of these amazing students who has supported students and myself with regards to psychology for years by visiting classrooms, replying to my annoying emails and phone calls. To finally share your insights into clinical psychology for all New Zealand students is really exciting and well overdue. It would also be fair to say when you entered this area of study and career, it wasn't as popular as it is today, even a subject at high school, and I think that's really blown it up. So that's something we may touch on today as well. You're a clinical psychologist based in Kirikiriroa, Hamilton, with a diverse professional background spanning mental health, sport and performance psychology, and child development, where you've dedicated your work to supporting the well-being of children and families. You hold a postgrad diploma in clinical psychology and a master's degree from the University of Waikato, where you develop the clinical expertise that underpins your practice today. Sport was a central focus during your school years, where you became the Cambridge High School inaugural sports captain and graduated in 2007. As a student, you were highly motivated, engaged in all activities, showing high amounts of motivation, discipline, resilience, qualities that continue to influence your work as a psychologist. Your academic journey into tertiary study was supported by the prestigious Sir Edmund Hillary Scholarship and Sir Edmund Hillary Higher Degree Scholarship, recognising both your leadership and your academic excellence. One of the highlights of your university experience was receiving the Step Higher Award in 2012, which I'd never actually heard about, which took you to Nepal to trek to Everest, an experience that reflects your willingness to embrace challenge and growth. Throughout your career, you've worked extensively in child development, paediatrics, and childcare and protection. Your work focuses on strengthening the mental health of wellbeing tamariki and their whānau in the area of increasing importance across Aotearoa, New Zealand. Psychology continues to be one of the most requested and popular career pathways amongst students. At Waikato, for example, it's one of the largest undergrad degrees. Many are drawn to the subject through engaging classroom content, but are curious about what that looks like in practice, hence you. Your journey offers a clear example of how an interest in psychology can evolve into a meaningful and impactful career. Students in New Zealand have a wide range of options when it comes to studying it, including programs at leading institutions such as the University of Auckland, Otago, Victoria, Canterbury, Massey, as well as Waikato I've already mentioned. Pathways typically begin with an undergrad study, BA or BSc, and can lead to a specialised postgrad qualification such as clinical psychology, which you'll talk about today. The demand for psychologists in New Zealand continues to grow. As of 2024, there's approximately 4,857 of them registered, with around 4,026 actively practicing. Of these, about 1,944 are clinical psychologists. The workforce is predominantly female and ageing, with over half aged above 50. That's not you, you're one of the young ones, contributing to the workforce shortages and increasing demand. Your story today will highlight not only the opportunities in psychology, but also the real impact psychologists can have in their communities, making it rewarding and highly relevant career choice for students considering it. And I just want to put a shout out before I get you talking. I know I've already talked a lot, but already in this health sector, we've had a personal trainer, nutritionist, med students, physio, social work, rehabilitation coach, radiologist, nursing, a gaming disorder expert yesterday. That was fascinating. And now we've got you, a psychologist. It just highlights kids who are interested in the health and well-being of our nation, or kids or adults, whatever it is, have a lot of options. So really happy to have you. Really great to see you again, Caitlin, not in my classroom, online. Can I take you back to school? Just your experiences back there I've touched on it a little, but we'd love to hear your insights into it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's nice to see you and nice to meet you, Grace. Um, yeah, I mean, so I was at Cambridge High School from 2003 to 2007. I think, yeah, like you touched on, school was great. School was great for me. I don't think academics was my main focus. I don't think I did poorly, but I wasn't a excellence all the way kind of person. Not because I couldn't, but I just think I had other motivations at that time, and sport was the one for me. I just loved anything, any game, any sport. That was where I wanted to spend my time. And yeah, probably pre-university in that high school years, I was really hoping to do something with sport. Yeah, I mean, school was great. I had a great teacher, obviously. I think I probably did better in geography than anything else, maybe English as well. I wasn't that fond of maths or science, but I think I did the prereqs that I needed, not by my own motivations, but probably from the guidance of my parents, actually thinking that you're going to probably go to university one day. Maybe you should just make sure you do these ones. So yeah, had them kind of steering that a little bit, which was helpful because I had no idea at that point. Yeah.
Well, if you had got advice early on and you said, I'm going to be a psychologist, someone would have might have been a dean at school, someone advising you on your timetable would have said, you're doing your maths and your science then. And that is a problem, because some kids then go, but I'm not completely enjoying those. And if they're the relevant ones, then clearly this isn't the career path for me. And we are noticing, Grace and I, a little bit of this. So yeah, did you feel that had any relevance? Because at that point in time in your head as a 15, 16, 17-year-old, you weren't going to be a psychologist, I presume.
No, I wasn't. I wanted to be a silver fern or a
That's right.
tall fern or a something, Obviously that didn't happen. I tried. I think now it makes sense as to why I needed those subjects. But yeah, definitely at the time, my understanding of psychology was very limited. I don't think I was even thinking about psychology when I was at school. I think it had just come in as a subject that you could take, potentially. Maybe it was like just coming in. And that was something that I didn't really think much about at that time. I was more interested in geography, the kind of sports science subjects were more my thing. But now, as a psychologist looking back, having that core understanding of statistics, really important when you're reading articles and needing to know how things work and is this a valid article? Has this study been done correctly? Is this advice okay to take, and how do we use it in practice?
Would you now say to a student, it's important and I'd recommend those subjects, but it's not detrimental? Because there could be a year 13 now watching this and by the end of it going, I want to be a psychologist, but I never took bio and I never took, and I know that's not going to stop them from getting into uni. They just may not have got good advice. They may be at a school somewhere where they don't have a teacher who teaches those things, so they don't have the subject available to them.
Yeah, I think, I do remember being at university and doing the statistics papers and thinking, oh, feeling a little bit out of my league here. Again, thankfully, luckily, my father was a maths teacher, so that helped. Maths and science teacher, so that really helped me, really. I think knowing what you do need is probably important, and thinking that through and seeing the bigger picture around that, while it may not be enjoyable at the time, trying to see how it maybe translates and can be helpful for that entrance into university or for your studies is probably a really good discussion to have, because I think just being told you have to do this or you should do this is very different to understanding the rationale why.
It's interesting too, and obviously there's no rule is what we're finding, because some people, they're fully encouraged to do what they enjoy doing and that works perfectly for them. But then other people like me who now are actually doing some psychology stuff at Massey. I didn't take statistics. I dropped math after year 11, and just understanding what a standard deviation is took forever, right? Because I was going back 10, 11 years on math recall. So to that point, and any parent, student listening, if you really know what you want to do, that's great, but also keep your mind open that later, me 10 years later, and pivoting, and I'm like, oh, I wish I'd just taken one more year of math, because trying to get those math juices flowing has been a challenge. But like you said, I'm finding very important to anything psychology related is statistics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like previous me, you want to do as much as you can to keep your options open if you're not sure where you're going. If you do know where you're going, then obviously hone in on the things that you need. But yeah, there's so many options available at university now that, yeah, if I was back at school, I'd be trying to keep as broad as I could to put my finger in every pie, because there's so many great options.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So talk to us. You get to year 13, you've dabbled in your subjects, you know, what got you to go to university? I'm presuming that was a fairly natural transition with the parents you had and you were academic, etc. Did you consider other universities? And when did the degree and that thought process of I'm going to do this, where did that come from? Where did you seek that advice from?
Yeah. Yeah. I think university was always going to be a natural progression, like you said, with my parents had both been through university. My brother was at Waikato University at the time. It's funny you refer to me as academic, because even to this day I still don't feel like I was academic. Whereas I would think of my brother as quite academic. He was the smart one. Yeah. So I kind of, university was just always going to be the natural progression. It was kind of like, this is what happens in our family, and that's where you go. That was just, and I was okay with that. I don't think I really thought otherwise. I thought maybe Otago, and I would do kind of a first year health science and see where that led me, because I really enjoyed the sports science and the nitty gritty of, cells and how all of that stuff works. And then with my sporting interests, I thought these things could mesh quite nicely. So I was thinking University of Otago, and maybe medicine would be a cool way to go if that's where it led me. But my amazing mother was like, you should apply for this scholarship. And so that was the Sir Edmund Hillary Scholarship, which I think I learnt about at an open day when we went to the university in year 13. And she really supported me in applying for that, and pulling that together. And I was just really lucky that scholarship wanted me too. And it was at that point that I then started to go, well, okay, so I've got this amazing scholarship, kind of all-inclusive, pays for my fees. I had to maintain my sporting, so it's a sporting and academic scholarship. So I had to maintain my sporting level, and also a grade level to stay on the scholarship. But it had amazing things that came from it, like, the trip to Nepal, but just the everyday supportive environment around it of trainers and support of other athletes and people in the same situation. But it was at that stage where I went, well, at Waikato, you can't become a doctor, or you can't become a physio. So what next interests me? And I thought, well, maybe being a sports psychologist would be something that would be really interesting to me, still kind of waving in the sport theme. And so that's what I was doing, okay, well, how do I become a sports psychologist? And there isn't a pathway really to become a said sports psychologist. So I just thought, well, what's the pinnacle of a psychologist? That's probably a clinical psychologist, and I'll just try and do that.
I'm going to walk away while Grace gets involved here.
Well,
Okay.
so Caitlin, that's exactly what I want to do, is sports psychology, and
Right.
not a registered, it's still not like a scope of registered practice in New Zealand. Where I am in the States, it's very early, starting to emerge in a sprinkling of schools. Obviously, there are sports psychologists out there, typically called like high performance psychologists, but that pathway is still challenging now. So I imagine going back just a little bit to when you were having that, there is unfortunately no clear path. But if I'm putting myself where you were, being in Waikato, it's a sports center. It's the closest thing you could get to, but yeah, there's so many questions I have about that, but I want to keep us centered where you are here, where you're like, okay, I'm staying here. I've got the scholarship, not only the funding, but it sounds like what also was quite motivating was it was going to hold you to a standard, sporting wise and academic. So while a lot of students might fear, okay, it's time to transition away from the sport, you had this like guarantee of like, no, this needs to remain. So just so I'm super clear, what was your sporting level like, and what did you have to keep up while you were there? Because I think that's really interesting for some students.
Mm. I think the Sir Edmund Hillary Scholarship each year kind of gets more and more prestigious. And I think the level gets higher and higher that people need to maintain to stay within it. I did netball and I was a swimmer. Those were probably my two main sports. And I actually, you generally have a sport that you're on a scholarship for, or you can be in the arts as well. So it takes people in the arts. And so I was doing netball and swimming and trying to stay at a high level on both of those, as well as, full-time study, which was really challenging. And I mean, time management becomes a really important thing. You have to kind of maintain where you are or keep going, really. They probably have it set out quite clearly now, but when I was in it, it was kind of like, don't teeter off. You stay where you are, and you keep performing better. And I think the grade level was like a B. You had to stay at a B average. And it's interesting because while at high school academics wasn't my main focus, it kind of switched when I got into university, and I was like, I want those A's. And I think that was the perfectionistic tendencies of me as a person, but as an athlete and as someone who's driven and motivated. And so I wanted, and so I really went for it at uni and actually did really well, which was led to lots of other scholarships as well outside of the sporting ones, which also helped kind of keep me in the university system and able to stay in the system for that 7 years that it takes to become a clinical psychologist.
Well, yeah, that's my next question is, as we mentioned, like sports psychology is not really an easy path. And you need to do something like become a clinical psychologist first. So please, if you could talk us through like first year, so you don't need to go year by year, but and then how it migrated from undergrad to when you make that decision of, oh no, I want to become a clinical psychologist. Like, talk us through that, please.
Yeah, so obviously went straight from school into university, finished my BSOC Sci, 2010. Then I did the honours year in psychology, and it was then at that point that I had to decide what area of psychology I wanted to go into. So at Waikato, they had a behavioural program you could go into. They had the clinical program. Did I want to just do a master's and a PhD and not go into either of those programs? And again, I think I was quite naive to it all. They take 8 people a year into the clinical psychology program. And most people apply at kind of all the universities and go through the interview and selection process at all those universities because it's really competitive to get in. I was super naive and super lucky because I just applied at Waikato and I managed to get in. I worked with an amazing psychologist and mentor of mine, and he applied 15 times before he got accepted into the program. And he won't mind me saying that because he's talked about that himself in certain things. But yeah, it's very competitive. But I just thought, so I did my master's in sports psychology. You do that alongside the clinical program. So the first 2 years of the clinical program, you're doing, core theory, and you start to get to know what happens out in the psychology world, and you see different services. The second year, you get a bit of a placement, and you have to get your master's all finished within those first 2 years before you can then go on to the internship year, which is where you do 4 days working, 1 day still university work and learning. I just applied and went through the processes and got in. And again, I just kept going with these amazing opportunities that I was having, and still probably not having a full appreciation of what a clinical psychologist does. I still don't think I really knew what that was for quite some time until I was quite deep into the program. Yeah.
Can you talk us through, if there's another Caitlin out there, doesn't have psych at school, not many schools do, they get enthralled, they want to go to learn psych. What are you learning about? Is it the cat? Is it, I said the word cat, my daughter's going to shoot me, but what sort of stuff will you learn maybe in your first 3 years before you decide to do more? Just encapsulate it for me.
Do you mean in the BSOC Psy or in the clinical program?
Yeah, the early stages of a psych degree at Waikato. What topics?
Yeah, I mean, I think with all degrees, there's kind of those core papers that you have to take, and then you get to choose the ones that interest you. But it's really just really theory based early on. So you're learning about all the different types of therapies, all the different principles of psychology, all the different strategies, and just getting that core understanding of human behavior, human biology. So obviously a lot about the brain. There was I think I remember doing one, and we looked at human driving in the brain and like decision making, and so there's lots of core subjects core papers you have to take, and then you obviously pick off the ones that you like. But it is a really broad, Grace can probably talk to this better than me, really broad level. And I remember we had a behavioral paper, we had a theories of psychology paper, we had a paper on the different therapy styles, but I can remember going to the lab, do lots of labs, and we had chickens, and we were training the chickens, and we would weigh the chickens, and we would teach them to peck on a schedule, and all that kind of real core behavioral, the kind of the underpinning of psychology. Yeah.
Can I just, before I forget, because we've mentioned a lot with you, there's a lot of scholarship support. And I just want to put a shout out, because we haven't done this for a long time. On YouTube, when you go onto the guest speaker, we have a whole lot of what's called Hunter's Help at the bottom. And there's a whole lot of videos for kids, how to apply for university, the halls of residence, student loans, and there's a whole video on scholarships at every university. So I just want to put a shout out, if a kid's sitting there listening to this, a parent or teacher, they can go on there and they'll hear the scholarship you got, but every other one you might not have got because you didn't apply for them at all the universities. So I just want to put a shout out, if kids are sitting there scratching their heads going, I quite like a scholarship, or I don't know how to apply for university, I don't know about my student loans or a halls of residence, get on to Hunter's Help on the guest speaker on YouTube and have a look at that. Okay, so the clinical stuff, you're sitting there, you're rather confused as to what this clinical psychologist is actually going to do. How does that pan out for you? When did you suddenly start to realize, that's going to be the career, that's going to be my job? Because I suppose that's what we're focused on.
Yeah, for so much of, the first 5 years, it's theory. It's knowing the theory, it's knowing the different disorders, it's talking about learning the different assessments, learning the different therapies, and it's so theory driven. And I think it was probably when I was in the second year of the clinical program, you start to get your own clients. So for a semester, you go, and we worked in a psychology centre, which was affiliated with the university, and you get given your case files, and you get given two real life people and cases. And that was probably for me when I was like, right, this is me. I'm the one who's responsible for this now. So all the stuff I've learned, I now have to try and do that with a real person, because I think in the training there's lots of role play with your fellow students, lots of trying all these different techniques and assessing, but it's always with someone that someone in your class, or one of the other 8. But sitting down face to face with a real person and having to do it. That was when I was really like, right, this is on me, and I've got to step up here.
It's also someone who doesn't actually have the problem they're pretending to have, which is a whole magnification. Yeah, how did you felt it prepared you? Because I'm going to liken it a little bit to what I saw when a student teacher would arrive
Mm,
and suddenly they're in front of the kids and they're clueless. Like you,
mm,
they've role played, they've decided, and all of a sudden the chickens come home to roost. Did you
mm.
feel that way, or when you had those two people who were actually whatever condition they had, and you were like, "Oh my goodness, I'm out of water here," or what? How did it pan out for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's all done in a very controlled way. So you have a supervisor who's kind of in charge of you and your caseload as well. So you're not just going blind. You're not, while yes, you're on your own in the room with them, we actually videoed all of our sessions and we would watch them back with our supervisors. And that's how we'd get a lot of our core learning and talking about how to do different strategies, or why did you go this way, or see how that person responded to that when you said that. So really uncomfortable when you first start doing that, seeing yourself on a video, hearing your voice on a video. But that's where a lot of the key learning comes from. And as a psychologist, you have to have a certain amount of supervision. So there's all these processes in place to make sure that you're kept safe as a clinician, but also the people that you're working with are kept safe and seen and supported at an ethical standard. But yeah, it was confronting. And I think that's where, again, like I talked about before, those perfectionistic tendencies of mine came to light. I thought, I need to read, I need to know everything about this condition so I can help this person. So, I would read and try and read everything I could and try and know everything I could. And that's a slippery slope if you've got a big caseload.
Yeah. Is this all part of becoming registered? So you've done by this stage, you've finished your study, but you're dabbling and beginning to practice. And then at what point, or is there no point, you might not ever be registered because you're no good? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so you have in your second year of the clinical psychology program, which is what we've been talking about, you do like a placement, and you're kind of like a trainee psychologist. It's in that third year, which is called the internship year, which leads to your registration. So you have to do, I think it's 1,500 hours of client work. So yeah, you work for the whole year for 4 days a week, like a normal job, like you're working 4 days a week in a psychology clinic. So in that third year, you get a lot more clients, and you have to have so many hours. There's exams and assignments that you have to pass in that final year. All the exams in the clinical psychology program are oral. So at the end of each semester, you would have an oral exam where you would sit in front of a panel of other qualified registered psychologists and some of the teaching staff, and you would have had to put in casework and videos, and they would have reviewed all of that, and then they question you about your work and about what you know, really. So you had to pass those oral exams at each stage to move on to the next stage, and then with the final year, complete those hours, pass the final big oral exam, and then you can become registered.
That's a lot of steps, which I appreciate, but is there any point, like there's 8 of you, that I understand now why there's 8, because there's so much work that the teaching staff have to do to support you through. Did everyone finish from the 8?
No. Yeah, no, it's not uncommon for people to maybe fail at the mid-year, so then they'd have to repeat that semester.
Yeah.
And kind of show. So at each stage there's a certain skill level that's required to kind of move on to the next. And so yeah, if you didn't kind of tick those boxes, you would continue in that space until you could show those skills, and then you'd move on. But an oral exam is tough. Yeah. Tough and anxiety provoking.
Yeah, you'd need a psychologist. I might be asking a question you can't answer because you're not the one assessing, although you're very experienced now. How much do you think that that judgment call was made on personality or knowledge or just attitude to the work? Why do you think some people, because I suppose I want to get out there to kids, like this is the attitude you might need. Did you felt your content knowledge was so on point, you were baffling them with that? Or was it because you look like a human, you act like you, and they're going, look, this girl is going to be wonderful? What did you think it was?
Yeah, I think it was probably all of the above. Like, yeah, I think my content knowledge, like I studied. Like when I was not at my job working, I was reading, I was studying. And there was one of my other classmates and I we just studied together. We tested each other. We developed templates. We were studying and really learning. But that was our personalities. That was kind of what helped us reduce that level of anxiety. But I think to even get into the clinical program, you've got to show certain personality traits. You need to be a kind, compassionate human being. You need to kind of have a critical thinking head, show that there's some morals and ethics involved in how you kind of move around certain things. You need to be, your interpersonal skills need to be up there, and also your reflective skills. Like it is a very confronting process, and you need to be able to take on feedback and implement that feedback to keep progressing. Being able to take that and talk about that. It really, I'd say don't become a psychologist if you don't want to really self-reflect and learn lots about yourself in the process.
That's a wonderful piece of advice, because I'd argue, I'm just going to say this, in teaching, pretty much the door shuts and the four walls are there. You might get a visit every now and again, but really, and even the idea of a video being set up, I'd imagine there'd be some soul searching. I would have had some myself, so I can understand that that's intimidating. I was going to ask you what personal qualities someone needs for this job, but I think you've touched on that anyway. Can you talk about career progression? What does your career look like? Who the hell do you work for? Does your job change much? Have you been dealing with different people? Could you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. So on top of all of this, when I was in I think it was my second year of the clinical program, I also, a couple of my classmates and I took on a role with the Department of Corrections. And so that wasn't as a psychologist, but it was called a psychometrician. So we would go and administer assessments in the prisons.
Wow.
And so that was probably my first, that was alongside, kind of first client work. But yeah, so that was one exposure, was going and working in these prisons and coming back and writing up assessments and giving feedback to prisoners about their reoffending and their risk.
Can I jump in here, Caitlin, because I'm picturing you, and I'm not being an idiot, but beautiful young girl going into a prison. How did you cope with that? Was it as confronting as I'd imagine it to be, or not?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I think you kind of know you're there for a job, and the clients that you see in the prisons know you're there for a certain role. And it really just depends on the person who's in front of you and what they're bringing to that relationship. And but definitely confronting, going through those double gates and getting buzzed in and having to have security clearance and all that kind of thing. Definitely confronting. And I think I quickly learned that probably wasn't my space, for some of those reasons, I guess. But so that was my first kind of little dabble, and then we had the clients throughout the program. From there, so you get to choose, or you apply for your internship. So you apply at different services that are willing to offer an internship. So I did my internship at the Child Development Centre, and that was where I got offered my first job post registration and finishing the program, and where I spent a lot of time. When I was there, I also started a bit, after a couple of years, started a bit of private practice in the sports psychology space, which was really cool. I really enjoyed that space. And then where did I go from there? Then I had a little bit of time just doing some general mental health work. And then I led myself back to child development and more in the health system with care and protection. So those have been my experiences.
Yeah, look, and what we've really been enjoying when someone really lets rip on the stuff they know. So if we talk child development, can you just talk about some of the things you're seeing, some of the issues you deal with? Obviously, no names, but yeah, what is child development all about? Can you really go to town with that?
Yeah, so there's different services. So in the Waikato, we have the Child Development Centre, which is based at Waikato Hospital, and that is your more pure developmental medical side of things. So you're seeing children where there's concerns about autism spectrum disorder, attention, ADHD, learning difficulties, intellectual disability, and a range of kind of genetic and medical conditions. So that was a lot of my work there. Obviously, there'd be anxiety and depression work, but because some of those things go hand in hand and are comorbid. But yeah, a lot of it is working with kids who actually were having a really hard time. The care and protection work that I did was seeing children who were in oranga tamariki care, and it was a bit of I did that alongside a experienced pediatrician, and we were like a one-stop shop of medical and psychological needs. So the kids would come in with their families or with their carers or with their social workers, and we would be doing kind of like a warrant of fitness of, what does this kid need to help them thrive given the situation and circumstances that I've come from. So I have unfortunately had to read a lot of hard things. And, before you get a client, you get a case file or you get all the information that's available, you get a referral, it has the information on why they need to be seen. And some of that stuff is, really, really hard reading, and really horrible experiences for these children. So that work was really, really cool. I really enjoyed that work.
Right. And what is, when you say that work, is your job, you meet a child, is the child with the family, you go about, how do you diagnose? How do you you devise a plan, and what does it, can you give us some examples of that? And then obviously what's your ultimate goal, I suppose, with what you do?
Yeah. So it depends what service you're working for. So when I was in the child development service, we were primarily assessment based because, the wait lists for an assessment still are extremely long. So we didn't have capacity in psychology to give much intervention in that service. So that would be outsourced to other services. But a day in a life there would be, you'd turn up to work and you'd have your case for that day, which you may have prepped the day before if you're lucky, or you get into it in the morning and you read through all the information that's available on the system and from the referral. Then you would meet with whoever's coming with the child and the child. So it could be mum or dad or grandma or social worker or whoever it would be. And generally would have a referral question. So it could be, does this child have autism, or this child's having a really hard time paying attention in school? Could there be an underlying diagnosis that would help explain this? So they'd come in and we would make a little bit of a plan about what assessment measures we'd need to do in that day. So some of these appointments would be an hour, some of them could be booked for 3 hours depending on what kind of client we're seeing. Whereas in mental health, when it's just you one-on-one with either a child or an adult, it's set up a little bit differently. So they'd come in for maybe an hour session, and then the next week you just kind of carry on doing hourly sessions and you kind of do your assessment through into intervention that way. And then we would do our assessments and score them, get to a diagnosis or not in that time. Sometimes we actually need to go and get more information. Sometimes we need to go and observe at school or in other environments, or we actually need to see you again and do more assessments. Or sometimes it's actually, let's just give you some time and let's see how things play out, and then let's touch base again. And then it would be coming up with a plan. So it would be, does this child need to go to a pediatrician? Does this child need to be referred to mental health services? What services can we put in place? So there are some intervention-based services at the Child Development Centre, but very different to how you would work with a client in mental health. In mental health, you would do the assessment, you would then formulate your diagnosis and your plan, and you would talk that through with your client. You'd come up with goals that you'd want to do, what is going to be important for your time in therapy together, and you would set goals and make a plan for how you're going to achieve those and work towards those. And then it would be a weekly or bi-weekly interaction on working towards those using specific therapies.
So that's someone who I've become depressed, and then I can, and that's the mental health stuff. That's sitting with you, developing a plan. Okay. Cool.
Happens in both services, but my specific role at Child Development Centre was assessment focused, with some slight intervention, but in mental health it was definitely more intervention heavy.
Is there any point, Caitlin, like I noticed down, obviously you're making these assessments, which by themselves is challenging because it's like, okay, we're watching you now. This is your time to be assessed, which in itself must kind of create some confounding variables. But in terms of, like, you've talked about how much your confidence was built through that reflective process of the Waikato university. But when you're with either it's like the parents of them or actually with the patients themselves, like, I guess, where do you feel like you got the training in maybe dealing with the emotions of people who maybe don't want to talk to you, or like are questioning your diagnosis, or how does that part factor in? Because it's got to be something that pops up semi often, I assume.
So that's where as psychologists we have to have supervision. We have to have a set supervisor. We have weekly or bi-weekly supervision where you'd go and you would talk about your cases in detail or any areas that you're finding challenging. We talk in psychology about, the relationship is so important, but that's tricky because, like I said before, people bring different things to a relationship, depending on their past and what they've been through. But we talk about a concept, I don't know if you've come across it in your studies, about transference and countertransference. And so that's transference is where the client projects their feelings onto the therapist. So they might project their childhood experience, like they may see you in a mothering view, say, or if you're a male in a fathering view, and countertransference is your reaction as a therapist to the client, your emotional reaction. And so that's something as psychologists that we learn a lot about in that clinical program. And that's something that, if you notice these feelings bubbling in the session, that you kind of, in the back of your mind, you're like, right, I need to talk about this in supervision. This is something that we need to work through, and I need to understand. It basically, supervision is talking about the cases and where to go in the kind of processes, but it's also mini therapy for you as a therapist.
That makes, it sounds like a great system that's in place. And Ludlam mentioned, like, we have physios and occupational therapists we've interviewed, and they talk about, like, no one's coming into their office because things are great. They're coming in because they're in pain or something. And as much as our healthcare workers, praise them, have apparently an abundance of patients, it's really good to know that just like in those industries with yours, there's a little outlet to make sure that people don't get burnt out, or try and make sure people don't get burnt out.
Yeah. I think that's something that I think it could be quite easy to get burnt out in psychology as a clinical psychologist. There's a lot of weight that does come with, you're seeing people, and And you've really got to think about how, your perceptions of the situation. And if you're going with the, I need to fix these people, or I need, that's really a slippery slope, because you're the expert in the kind of theory and the processes, but it's a two-way street. Like, people need to be coming into therapy often not motivated, but need to be coming because they're wanting to get better. And so it's how good are you as a therapist if there's some motivational issues there, to help support that person and work through that to help them come out the other side. But it is, if I took the perfectionistic, I need to fix this person kind of view with me the whole way, I think I would have burnt out. You need to know your boundaries.
Are there other things you do, Caitlin, that for your own mental health? Because this is a tough job.
Yeah.
We're not seeing the people who are on top of the world. So what is there any other strategies you have where you'd recommend for people going into this that they'd need to stay healthy themselves?
Yeah. I think while you have your kind of key supervisor, there's other psychologists working in the same environment as you. When I worked at the Child Development Centre, we worked in multidisciplinary teams. So you'd be working with a pediatrician or an occupational therapist, a speech language therapist, a physio. So having like that multidisciplinary team support, really great. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed it because you get to learn about their side of things, but you're also kind of in it together, which is nice. You're all working on the same difficulty or problem or whatever it may be. Whereas, when you're one-on-one, it's a little bit trickier because there's more kind of ownership of that. But for me, it's having really clear boundaries about work stays at work. That's easier said than done. I've got an amazing husband who, obviously I don't share details with him, confidential details with him, but he can tell if things are starting to bubble. But moving my body, exercise has always been my thing. And so keeping that going and probably upping it, making sure that you're getting outside, getting that sunlight, interacting with other people, just all those really core self-care kind of areas.
Yeah. Has your job impacted on you as a mother? Do you feel there's things? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think, while all of this sounds like it was really challenging, being a mother's a whole nother ball game. And I know I have all the theory there. I've worked in child development, it's a double-edged sword. I think it definitely has, but I actually think becoming a mother is probably going to impact my practice more. I think it gives me a whole nother view on things, a whole nother appreciation, a whole nother level of empathy and compassion, and obviously another experience that I can bring to the table. I think they've both impacted each other.
Yeah, no, good to hear. What advice would you give families if they were seeking help for a child? Because I know in New Zealand, there's often things in newspapers, people can't get help or don't know where to look. Do you have any advice? Where do people go initially? And where do they reach out? If someone's listening to this because they knew what to be on and you're a child specialist, what would you recommend?
Yeah, it's very region specific about what services are available and the pathways to get into those services, and there's certain criteria to reach services that are funded. Obviously, there's lots of private psychologists out there, and that's an avenue that lots of people take. They don't work for your DHB or your Department of Corrections. They work in the private space. I think the GP is obviously the first port of call, and hopefully a good GP in that area will know what services are available and will know the referral pathways. But even schools, having a chat with your school, who most schools have a SENCO, a special education needs coordinator, who should know what services are available. But I suppose as a parent, you're the expert of your child, and if you're feeling like something's not quite right or you need help, then absolutely advocate for that and seek that help. And there's no shame in seeking that help.
No. And I just want to put a shout out there, because what I didn't understand in our old school, we had counsellors. So a lot of schools need counsellors. Here at Mercury Bay, they have psychologists working there. And I don't know whether that's just they got lucky or what it is. So maybe one point of call is just knowing what qualification you have at the school could be an interesting variation that I knew nothing about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is becoming a bit more common that schools are having some psychologists now, which is another avenue for this. I mean, there's so many different places you can work as a clinical psychologist, and that's what's exciting about it, is that yes, you become a clinical psychologist, but you could be working in, like I said, corrections 1 year, and then you could work somewhere else. Obviously, there's lots of learning that comes with that, though. But yeah, there is scope to have quite a lot of variation over your career if that's what you're wanting to do. Some people do lots of different things. Some people really specialize.
Yeah. Yeah, and before we wrap this up, Caitlin, what's the most rewarding thing you get, because it's been a job you've been in a while now? What do you see for yourself are the most rewarding parts?
I mean, I think it comes down to, obviously I'm a caring person, and it's that helping other people. And I think we have to appreciate that if someone's brave enough to seek help, brave enough to come and sit in a room with a stranger, where you talk about things that you've probably never talked about with anyone before, that it's understanding that vulnerability that person's showing in that moment and having compassion. And so I think it's the relationship building, it's the seeing someone thrive or make progress, which is rewarding. And I think in terms of the child space, it's, children are so vulnerable, and being able to advocate or help a child's life get slightly better, then why wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, brilliant. Look, I just want to thank you for all of that. Back to my intro, you are someone who's answered my call for help on numerous occasions. So to capture all this so someone can actually rewatch it is going to be brilliant. Just thank you for everything you've always done for us and for me. And congratulations on your career and becoming a mum. And be nice to catch up with you in person sometime. But yeah, thanks for the time you've spared and your thoughts and insight, because it's just completely invaluable to us.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I think it would be fantastic to have more and more psychologists. I mean, we need them. We really need them. Our services are really stretched, and yeah, the more we can get, the better for everyone. And yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's always obviously I'm passionate about it. I like talking about it, and I have got here I've kind of floated into it, but I've landed in it, and and I roll with it, and it's just continual learning, really. Yeah, it's a cool space to be.
We say this many times, but we're just thrilled that someone like you is in the space.
Yeah.
Like, if for some reason someone's bringing someone to see you, it's quite comforting to know that in New Zealand you're there. And so to encourage those people in that space. The last question, Caitlin, we ask everyone is, if you could go back to yourself when you were in year 13 and it was just Caitlin to Caitlin advice, what would you be giving?
Oh, there's a lot. I think it would be just broadly go and get as much experience in different interest areas as you can. Because I always thought, yes, understanding why people do things is really interesting. But like I said, I didn't really understand how they actually worked till quite late. And so going and I've had quite a few students come and talk to me. And be like, how do I become a psychologist, or what does it look like, and even just taking them for a little tour around a workplace. So yeah, go and talk to people, tap on people's shoulders, get in there. But also I think I'd go and get a breadth of experiences and just really see what interests you and what pulls you. And even if you start doing one thing, it's okay to change and do something else. No one's going to get broken. It might be a bit of time and a bit of money, but yeah, go for it.